We continue with the Boston Red Sox for this special edition of State of the Division Deadline Breakdown. And we've already gone through the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Rays, the top dogs seemingly in this division. But the Red Sox were the second team in this division not so long ago, but they've fallen apart. And now they have, we still don't really know what they're going to do at the deadline, but we're going to break down a few scenarios based on the next week because the Red Sox now sit 49-48. They're 2-8 in their last 10, 13-17 in their last 30, and they sit 3 games back of the wild card. I mean, it's crazy to think that the Red Sox were like the 6th best team in all of the league between the AL and NL like a month ago. And now they're just a half game up on the Baltimore Orioles for 5th place in the AL East. And so now it's like, okay, do the Red Sox sell? If they lose 5 of the next 6 games, do they sell? Or if they're 3 games back of the wild card, do they kind of go halfway in? And that's kind of what I want to ask you first. I have my opinions, but Sam, I want to ask you what you think the Red Sox are going to do as this deadline comes to a close.
So it all depends on what happens the next week, like you alluded to, right? But I think if they do continue to struggle over the next week and they're a below 500 baseball team going straight into the deadline, I put it out on my Twitter the other day. I think the Boston Red Sox should 1,000% trade Xander Bogert. If they don't plan on re-signing him, at least get some kind of value back for that guy. Your priority has to be re-signing Rafael. That has to be the priority. And then even if they decide to sell, I think a guy like JD Martinez could go. A Christian Vasquez is another guy that could have some decent value. He's actually been pretty good this year. So if they are good over the next week, I think they should make like a mini push. I think like a Josh Bell is a good guy that we've been talking about a really long time with the Boston Red Sox because they have a first base problem. But if they struggle, I think they should sell. And I think they 1,000% should trade Xander Bogert.
All right, let's start with the sell option here because Chris Sale is now possibly out for the season, which is brutal. And literally, the Red Sox have been relying on 4 AAA starters to kind of hold down their rotation the last 3 or 4 weeks. And so with Sale now gone, obviously Eovaldi's back. But I agree, Sam. I agree. If the Red Sox lose the rest of the way in this next week, and they're 5 or 6 games out of the wild card, I think it's possibility that they trade Xander Bogaerts because I don't think they're going to re-sign him. And pre-show, we were talking about what if, I compare a Xander Bogaerts trade to a Javier Baez trade from last trade deadline, where they traded Javier Baez for Pete Crow Armstrong, who was an injured prospect for the Mets, but a top prospect nonetheless. If that's a possible return for a Xander Bogaerts type player, and Xander Bogaerts is better than Javier Baez, I can see even a better return. I think you absolutely got to do it and just focus your mind on re-signing Rafael Devers and focus on 2024 at that point, because it's not going to happen this year until you get some of these young guys to develop and get some better free agent players, especially with Trevor Story hurt as well. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, very similar to the Javier Baez thing. You don't know if Xander's going to stay where he gets traded to. Like Xander Bogaerts could get traded to the St. Louis Cardinals, and we don't know if he's going to sign an extension. Javier Baez got traded to the Mets, didn't stay with the Mets. He signed that mega deal with the Tigers, which looks like one of the worst deals in baseball. So we don't know if Xander's going to stay. And if you can get that kind of return for a guy like that, who's been one of the best shortstops in baseball this year, should have started the All-Star game over Tim Anderson, in my opinion. I would 100% do it because at this point, I don't think they have any intention of re-signing him long-term because they gave Story the money that they did. And I don't think Story, unless that elbow is that bad, I can't see him playing second base for the next 5 years. I just don't think it's probable. So if you can get something out of Xander Bogaerts right now and they're not going to compete, I would 1,000% do it.
Yep. But if they are 2 games out of the wild card, even in the wild card, if they win a ton the next week and they're right now wild card race, I see them doing the similar approach that they did last trade deadline, where they were in a similar situation. They were in first place at the time, I believe, but, kind of falling apart at that time. They traded for Kyle Schwarber for Aldo Ramirez. They gave up nothing for Schwarber because he was hurt. And then they got 2 kind of upside bullpen arms and Hansel Robles and Austin Davis. Austin Davis has been awesome this year. Hansel Robles just got DFA'd. So kind of a tale of 2 cities there. But I think they go something similar to that. I could see them getting a Josh Bell, who's going to cost a little bit more than a Schwarber. I could see Trey Mancini possibly. I don't know what the Orioles are going to do. I don't know if they would trade him within the division. And then relievers, yeah, it's the same old suspects, right? Daniel Bard, hello, old friend. He came up with the Red Sox. He was drafted by the Red Sox in 2006, got the yips, fell out of baseball. What a return that is. That's probably one of my favorite storylines, was him coming back at age 35 after being out of the game for 8 years. And then you have David Robertson, who we've been harping on. Michael Fulmer is a guy we haven't really talked about. But I think Fulmer is a really, really interesting high leverage option because he was a starter, but he's been awesome out of this high leverage, relief role behind Gregory Soto, who kind of takes the shine away from Fulmer. And at this point, I don't see them going out and getting Frankie Montas or Luis Castillo or Tyler Mahle. It doesn't make sense.
So you think they get a reliever instead of a starter?
I think they go get a reliever
in that situation.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. If there were cheaper options on the pitching market, I could see it happening. It's just that all the guys on the pitching market this year are really going to be expensive, and they come with control. Tyler Mahle even has control next year. Luis Castillo has control next year. Montas has control. Pablo Lopez has control. It's like there's really no good rental arms on the market this year, and so I don't see the Red Sox giving up any of their top 5 prospects at this point to go get one of those guys because they have so many injuries on this team. I mean, we didn't even talk about Kike Hernandez, who's been out with a hip injury. And I really don't even know if he's going to be able to come back this season because hip injuries just linger. So there's so many questions around this team with injuries and relying on your young players right now. And it's like, the Red Sox can't just build a new team at the trade deadline unless they give away their farm system. And that just does not seem to be the model that Chaim Bloom is going to follow and hasn't followed since he got to the Red Sox. It's all about building for that 2023, 2024, 2025, when you have Rafael Devers locked up and you kind of move into this new era beyond the Xander Bogarts, beyond JD Martinez, even beyond Nate Eovaldi and Chris Sale. There's going to be a new era. And I think the Red Sox, yes, they would like to compete and see if they can make a wild card run this year and see what happens in the playoffs. That was true last season, right? They weren't supposed to be good last year, but they made a run to the playoffs. And then you never know what happens in the playoffs. They make an ALCS run. They were 2 games from going to the World Series. They had a 2-1 lead on the Astros. So you never know what's going to happen, but they're not going to sacrifice their future for this season.
Can't see it happening. And, like I said, I hope they deal if they're bad. The reliever thing is interesting. I do like Fulmer a lot. The interesting thing about Fulmer is the Detroit Tigers bullpen is like insane. And I feel like nobody talks about it. They have like the 3rd lowest bullpen ERA in baseball. And Michael Fulmer has the 5th lowest ERA in that pen. In the pen, he's got like a 2.4, which is crazy. So I think Fulmer, if they buy, that's the pick right there, because I don't want to see David Robertson in a Boston Red Sox uniform. That would haunt me forever. And then with a first baseman or a DH, I don't like Rob Refsnyder being your everyday DH. I think that's weird. And Bobby Dahlbeck is not great. So again, it's all about what happens in the next week. So it's a tale of 2 cities with that one, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, before we close out this episode, I do want to touch on not even Bobby Dahlbeck, not even Jaron Duran, who's struggled as of late. I want to touch on Franchi Cordero, who has a 48% strikeout rate in the month of July. 48%. That is really hard to do. Okay, that'll do it for the Red Sox. We'll see. We'll see what happens over the next week. If they win, they're going to go halfway in. If they lose, they're going to sell Bogarts. They're going to sell JD. They might even sell Vasquez. And I think they should, so that they can build up. There's no point in trying.